What a great time to be at Union Congregational Church. You got a young pastor that's too young to be cynical yet. You've got a self-replicating choir. Isn't that cool? You've got teaching these young people about GOP tax cuts. I love this. You're futuring. If you want to make God laugh, tell her what you're going to do tomorrow. That'll make her laugh. We only have a few minutes, so I won't bury the lead. Be like Oded. Preaching tells us that if you really want to tell somebody this is preaching 101, tell them again, be like Oded. Be like Oded. That's the whole sermon. You can go home if you have to. You can go back and read this stuff. You just heard everything we know about Oded in 8 verses, but you should learn this story extremely well. It's hard to stumble through those verses, but more in a minute. Upon receipt of the invitation to be here, I thought to myself, this probably has something to do with my weird, strange affinity for religion and politics and some of the crazy things that I've undertaken over the years. And after conferring with my friend Rick Wright, my suspicions were confirmed. The decision was made, though, on my part, that if we're going to do this, I have to check you out. What is the politics of Union Congregational Church? Someone like me should know something about the audience before stepping up here. I do know UCCs reasonably well. You see, the United Church of Christ are kissing cousins to us disciples of Christ, but I have to confess, actually, if I'm going to be accurate in describing this, we sort of embrace at a distance, Oh, yes. A UCC congregation secured my services as pastor about 25 years ago, while I was concurrently serving a disciples congregation. John Dorhauer, whom some of you know, has spoken from my old pulpit. Others who have led your denomination have been out in the desert with me in Mexico and other places. At this time in my life, I have to say that I like the UCCs better than my own denomination, but these are my roots, at least most of the time. Your congregation piques my interest. Perhaps I should even join this congregation. You have a Facebook page. It's kind of scary. Union Congregational Church strives to embody, I love the phenomenology of that word, Micah 6:8 in our community and worship, to do justice, to love kindness, and journey humbly with our God. We're part of the United Church of Christ. Our doors and communion table are open to everyone. Kind of scary. The open communion part is a great big deal to us disciples. We nearly merged that UCC congregation and that disciples congregation during my tenure in the 90s. But one local prominent UCC church leader says, "We're not sure about this weekly communion thing." I said, "It's no big deal. Just do what my members do and don't show up every week." Doing justice sounds great, but we contest what is justice every single day in this land. You cannot get into a headline or any story today without trying to figure out whose justice. Our current leaders interpret that as taking violence to the ends of the earth. Nope, that's not my kind of justice. I once quoted Wally Brueggemann on justice during an offertory prayer at a church. Justice is finding out what belongs to people and giving it back to them. That's what justice is, according to Wally. I kind of like that. They nearly tarred and feathered me and ran me out of the church. Kindness, it sounds great. Insert sarcasm here. There's already so much wonderful kindness that I see and observe every day in social media. We're so kind to each other. Maybe we don't need a church. Just get on Facebook. Just feel the kindness. Journey humbly, that is a killer for me. I don't do humble. I'm sorry. My training is to make an awful lot of noise and use self-serving attention-getting as a tool for doing my work. It all sounds good, but then when you when you get down into the trenches, into the mud, into the borders, and into the politics, and in the many rooms, it gets really tough. In this moment, my goal is to exhort you to be like Oded. Humble people don't tell you to go be somebody that you're not. This guy is my hero, all 8 verses of him, but I have to introduce him to you through Jesus. Most of you know the so-called story of the so-called Good Samaritan. He's the helper guy who was actually not called good by Jesus. And if you study it from a Jew's perspective, this Samaritan did everything wrong. Everything wrong. He spent time with the wrong people. He shamed the purported leaders of the people. He practiced what was tantamount to sedition to the whole social order. Social status, holiness code, geography, personal ethics, and morality. He violated all of it. And Jesus had the audacity to tell the young lawyer questioner to go and do likewise. Jesus was a troublemaker, and he was trying to train another one to take his place. What does this all have to do with Oded? Oded is the name of the Samaritan. I want you to know that. Oded is the story of the Good Samaritan on steroids. Did I say he's my hero? Did I say to be like him? Yes, 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 yes. Please be like Oded. You can go home now if you have to. Ancient Israel knew all about foreign relations, just like modern Israel is practicing all kinds of strange foreign relations. They knew that the Assyrians had ventured south and was kicking the whatever out of the people down south, robbing, raping, pillaging, taking kindred into slavery, oppressing, depriving. So being good little opportunists, the Israelites decided to emulate the Assyrians. Such justice, such kindness, such humble walking, dragging 200,000 slaves back to Israel and heaping up sin so horrible that they reached all the way to God into the heavens. But the story takes a twist. It seems that there was a member of Union Congregational Church there who believed Micah 6:8. He was a prophet of God who was not a Jew. Maybe he was a journalist by profession. Journalists are so popular right now. I'm a journalist too, by the way. Maybe he was a young seminarian from Union Theological Seminary over here, Upper West Side. Maybe he was a community organizer. Maybe he was somebody from Church World Service. God help us. We don't know. We don't know a thing about this, but it can be said truthfully that this prophet probably got vaccinated with religion when he was a kid. Probably making a living doing something else, as most prophets did in those days. A congregation or a whole church can be prophetic. Sorry, but preachers are just priests. But whole peoples can fulfill a prophetic role. They can be a prophet. Still, every once in a while, God does touch one person, an individual. And when she touches you, you've got to respond. You must act. Now get this. Here's what Oded did. He went and stood down the entire Israeli army. Tiananmen Square style. One person, one army. Heroic. Words are deeds. He talked to the 4 sons of the chiefs whose names are horribly to pronounce. But they were running the show. They're the public administrators of the day. And you wonder where we get the idea of civilian oversight of the military, but that's another sermon. I've got it. The sons were the public administrators, and he told them that every single thing that they were doing in terms of public policy were wrong. You just cannot do this stuff to your kindred. And right out of the middle of nowhere, justice happened, kindness was shown, a new humble journey was begun. They brought all the stuff of life out in front of the leaders. They brought out all of the captives. This thing was public. Wounds were tended to. Shoes were put on the feet of these people. Probably a Jesus sandal made popular by Nike. People were put on donkeys. Everyone headed back to the city of Palms, Jericho. Heroic justice was done. 33 years ago, I had my fingers in the bullet holes of a guy coming from Chiapas, Mexico. He had made it to Los Fresnos, Texas, just north of Brownsville. He was a former mayor of a community down there. Violence was all around him in his life. And I expressed the infection, ordered up some penicillin, and somehow or another it magically appeared in about 20 minutes. No doctors. Somebody over here works in pharmaceuticals. I talked to a couple this morning. You know, there was no prescription. The stuff just showed up. Eventually, we got him political asylum. 20 years ago, a Border Patrol sector chief and I gathered a whole bunch of then Immigration and Naturalization Service, Border Patrol generals, majors, captains, and others in a room filled with good deed doers. And so the two of us were sitting up there in front of all these other people, and I don't know if it was good cop, bad cop, weird person, sympathetic to the church. I don't know how this thing came into being, but I started talking to them about Walter Rausenbusch's version of the Good Samaritan, a story that's been told for over 100 years, nearly 100 years now. He told the story of the Samaritan as a traveling salesman who went back and forth between Jerusalem and Jericho very often. Every time he made that trip, he found some man that was beaten, robbed, stripped, within an inch of death along the road. And this Samaritan, the way Walter Rausenbusch told the story, he had a talking donkey. By the way, there is a talking donkey in the Bible. You guys need to read the Old Testament every once in a while. There's some funny stories back there. Nothing new here. The donkey said, "Why don't you take up a collection, hire a cop to patrol this section of highway?" So it's a good idea. And so in that meeting, I said, "We're looking for the talking donkey. Anybody in this room that has a good idea, we're going to listen to it." Anyway, Rauschenbusch told this story over and over and over during the so-called progressive era of the United States to encourage the creation of hundreds and now thousands of special nonprofit organizations to embody, again, there's that special word that you used on Facebook, to embody social justice, to deliver the goods and services that make this crazy country of ours a livable place. Just a little sidebar here. Every human service delivery system known in the United States was first articulated, experimented, and created and staffed in churches. Every one of them. So stay creative. Rausenbusch's words have been important for me. I was the founder and first president of different nonprofits that delivered goods and services to migrating people on the road for whatever reason, refugees, asylum seekers, undocumented. Our groups took strength from Oded, from the Good Samaritan, from Matthew 25, and a lot of different places. The Bible is absolutely chock-filled from beginning to end with stories of migrating people. They were all border jumpers. Abram, Moses, Ruth, Naomi, Jesus, Peter, Paul, all these stories include narratives about authority, jurisdiction, power, nationality, and more. Learn them. That third of a century landed me on the cover of Pravda in Moscow, the Pakistani military news, the Mandarin Chinese news service, and every media market on earth. It's not enough to change the policy, but it was a fun ride. Today, the policies are worse, more harsh, more punitive than they've ever been in the history of the United States. We're living a debacle. My government has spied on me, infiltrated my organizations, lied to me, and denounced me in the news. If you're like Oded, there's absolutely no guarantee that you will ever be successful as the world counts such things. Immigration ministry cost me 2 marriages, though to get together I was married 40 years. I was not all that bad, but anyway, it made me a little bit crazy. Rick and Allison can testify. But sometimes there's no alternative but to go and do what you were taught to do. I was talking to a teenager in Tapachula, Chiapas, just a few minutes from Guatemala. Both of his legs had been amputated as high as his privates, as the physician said, after falling from a train coming to the U.S. About 10 minutes into this conversation, the quasi-interview that I was having with this kid, he looked at me and he said, "Are you a preacher?" Well, yeah, okay, yeah, I wasn't dressed that way. He said, "Well, you certainly don't look like it." That's when he put this reminder around my neck. It doesn't matter what you look like. You can take the race and sex and gender stuff, make it all inclusive. It doesn't matter. Anybody can do Christian ministry. You can fill the role. When you let the role determine what you're all about, you're missing what God is doing in the world. Those people who passed by the nearly dead man on the road, they all knew their roles and they knew their social order, didn't they? The priests and the Levites, the armies, the public administrators, everybody. I'm just doing my job. That's the famous Nuremberg defense. I'm just doing my job. Down south and out west, we call this kind of preaching giving testimony. It's a little strange to UCCs, I know. We disciples have a different way of preaching sometimes, so sorry about that. Hope you endure. I've been in the rooms and in the fields and in some strange places, and then Presidente Felipe Calderon put a gold medal around my neck as a way of saying thank you for helping Mexicans in the United States. The church put this stole around my neck when I was ordained. Sometimes it's kind of hard to figure out what your role is, how you're supposed to live in society, how not to say bad words in the pulpit, stuff like that. Yeah. What have I learned in my journey? Jesus had it right. It's the going and the doing that is the most important thing. Occasionally I get a bug and I just have to write stuff down. Then people like Rick Wright have to edit and edit and edit and edit and continue editing. So I have a book now in English, and next week that book will be released in Spanish. Some journal articles, some book chapters. I've tried to tell people a little bit about my story. So anyway, that's another one of those non-humble, shameless self-promotion pieces. But read the book. Maybe you'll get a little bit out of it. I'm not sure. I've built shelters for migrants in Texas. I've helped construct more than a dozen big documentaries and films, including an HBO special called The Wall, which aired on the 100th anniversary of the Mexican Revolution. I've assembled many thousands of volunteers to just go and do. Then you can come back and talk about it and tell me what you've learned. I've learned that if you've been touched, you must touch others. It's never good enough to sit back, opine, and feel satisfied with your opinions and your beliefs. Life is not about philosophy, it's orthopraxy. It's not opinions, it's the doing. My struggle with disciples is that they do way too much opinion taking and too little justice making. The thing I like about UCCs and the leaders that I've worked with is you guys do get out there. You have your personal and collective convictions, your theology, your ethics, and the really neat thing about UCCs is that you think all that stuff actually matters out there in the world of public policy. And that's inviting to me. I like that. I wrote a dissertation about that kind of stuff. As far as I can see, all of these qualities pass the smell test for justice, kindness, and humility. You get a star. There's an allure to this invitation, and I like that. Not sure that I could live up to the standards of what you have on Facebook as a member of this congregation, but it's all appreciated. We are living in some horribly difficult times, if you know anything about my field. But there's hope. Elections, register. Synods, talk. Nonprofits, support them. Work-study trips, I call them conversion experiences. When we got a few folks together in Tucson and decided to put water out in the desert for people dying of thirst, I told my church board I had only been there 5 months in this congregation. And I looked them in the eye and I said, look, I don't play golf. I've already been appointed to the steering committee of this group you've never heard of. And I'm going to give all of my free time to it. And I turned to them and I said, how much of my time are you going to give to this organization? Nothing like a little uppity pastor. The elder that most people listen to looked around everybody and said, 50%. Woo, unanimous. A little old lady that I love dearly, that buried not too many years ago, came up and says, you go out there in the desert and save all the lives you can, but if I'm in the hospital, I want you to come and talk to me and hold my hand. I said, okay. I didn't come here to give you any difficulties. The church members had already decided to do that when they invited me. So it's not between you and me. But I'm here to remind them, to warn you that I want all of you to push him out of the nest as often as possible. Okay? People in a congregational government can do that. Remember, you have the power. I love that. This is just like disciples. So that hospital call might be at 5 a.m. or 9 p.m., and that sermon might be taken from your last conversation with the Department of Homeland Security or some other entity. There's a world out there that's hurting and in need of all of your free time and all of your free time, okay? There's nothing when you do this that will be new according to the Scriptures. Jesus never said one new thing. The Hebrew Bible was his Bible. He twisted, he turned, he manipulated, he held it up different. Turn it round and round. In it, everything can be found. But Jesus never said anything new, not one, except one little phrase. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another as I loved you. That would make a great Christmas sermon. The whole thing, your life, this congregation, everything that you know about the Christian faith hinges on those two itty-bitty words, as I. And like city slickers, when I know you can't use this in college, you can only tell this in front of old folks. When they held up their hands, says the secret to life is just one thing, and you got to figure out what it is. Well, you got to figure out what as I means. Your life will be eternal, indelible, unchangeable, worth dying for when you go and do as Jesus did, as Oded did, as many others, giants on whose shoulders we stand. We need Oded right now to stand down the armies. We need Oded to convert the public administrators of this nation. The world needs congregations to be a living Oded right now, so the sermon is be like him. Talk them down. Shame them if you have to. Stand outside of your perception of your own role and just do what's right. For heaven's sakes, this is no time to be quiescent in this country. Be like Oded. Maybe people will come here and see what all the commotion is about. As you future mission first, everything else is residue.